Hey everyone, welcome back to Deep Developer YouTube channel. So if you are preparing for Spring Boot interview and you are having 3 years of experience, and especially for the companies like Infosys, you are giving the interviews or the other enterprise related tech companies. So that may be TCS, Infosys, Tech Mahindra, so then this video is made for you. So today we'll be diving into the 40 most frequently asked Spring Boot interview questions, and will not just the questions, but I will be try to provide you the real explanation and industry level insights, and I will try to give some examples so you can use to confidently to answer them in your uh, next interview. So by the end of the video, you will be understanding the score Spring Boot concept like auto configurations, REST API, JPA, security microservices, caching. So all with some clear explanation and real life scenarios. So let's get started. So before going ahead with the video, so we already have one playlist for Java Backend Developer interview questions and answer preparations. So I will suggest you to go through this playlist after the videos. And here in this Deep Developer YouTube channel, we make the videos on Java, Spring Boot, microservices, REST API development. So I will suggest you to please subscribe to the channel. So, and if you have any doubts or if you want me to cover any specific topic, you can mention that on the comment section. So let's get started. So let's get start with our first question. So what is a Spring Boot? So this is the most general question that is asked in every interview questions. Like you can mention that Spring Boot is an like extension of the Java framework that help us to build a standalone production ready auto configurable Java applications with a very little setup, and it provided like features like auto configuration, and it have the default started dependencies, and it had embedded server. So if we see like in industry level examples like in enterprise Java project, instead of manually configuring XML files or the application server, we use Spring Boot to launch microservices very quickly. Next question is what are the advantages of using Spring Boot? So Spring Boot speed up the development because we already have these auto configurable features and we have embedded server, and it has like simplified a starter dependency like a Spring Boot starter or Spring Boot data JPA. So those starter dependencies which help us to reduce the boilerplate codes and improve productivity. Next question is explain the auto configuration in the Spring Boot. So auto configuration it automatically configures like a bean Spring Bean, and based on the different kind of libraries that we provided on the pom.xml files and the property setting or the environment. So here we no need to manually create the bin definitions. So if you take an industry level examples like when you use Spring Boot starter data JPA, so and a database driver. So on the class path, so Spring Boot configures the data resource and the entity manager factory for you automatically. So what are Spring starter? So Spring Boot starter, these are the dependency bundle that comes up with different starter dependencies like starter web, starter security, Spring Boot starter data, JPA. So adding this web Spring Boot starter web, it set up everything that need for an REST API. It have MVC, Tomcat, Jackson. So we no need to handle each dependencies manually. So what is the Spring Initializer? The Spring Initializer is we can say interface, or we can say platform where we can generate the project. So we have seen this a lot of time in our videos. So let's get move with the next questions. So what does Spring Boot application do? So Spring Boot annotation, it comes up with the combination of configuration, enable auto configurations, and the component can scan. So it helps to like bootstrap the. So if we see in the monolithic services or the monolithic architectures, it have like one applications, and we have seen most of this time, and we use the Spring Boot application which act as the like entry point. It scan the all the packages mentioned on there, and it auto configures the beans by itself. So what is dependency injection? And the dependency injection is a design patterns where Spring Boot supplies dependent object rather than the classes creating manually. So we need to no need to create the object by using a new keyword. So automatically when we do at the rate auto add annotations, it inject the bin. So it can be done with like setter injection or the constructor injection as well. So what is Spring IOC container, and what does it do? So IOC means inversion of controls. It's a container that manages the object lifecycle and dependency injection in the bins. So it create and word the bins based on the configuration and the annotations. So this is the like one of the most confusing and asked questions, like what is the difference between other REST controller versus other rate controller. So before going ahead with the video, so if you're still watching the video, I would request to please subscribe to the channel and provide any feedback on the comment. So REST controller, it returns like as an JSON or the XML as a response directly. So while the controller is used in the MVC views. So when we are creating any, like we have seen like lastly we have used this student applications where we are returning this student object as a response. So that was the JSON object. We can see that on the Postman. So mainly we use this REST controller for creating a REST API in the microservices, and the controller we used for the web-based applications or the web applications where we will be serving HTML views with the time. A difference between the get mapping and the request mapping. So get mapping we used as a shortcut on the top of our methods. We have also seen this annotations a lot of time, and it is a shortcut for request mapping and mention the method and get. If it is in post mapping, we should mention method equal to post, delete, something like that. So we mainly use this in the REST endpoint using the specific mapping that improves the readability and maintenance of the HTTP operation. So what is application dot properties and the application dot YML file is? So both defines the app configurations, and YML supports the hierarchical formatting, and it's often easier for organize the complex setting. And this application dot properties file we can use depending upon which environment it is, dev environment, test, or production. So we have used this a lot of time in our um, videos. So Spring profiles. So profiles let you configure the environment specific variables and the properties. For example, if you are running your application locally, so it should not point to the production database. So for that, you can have like a local profile. For the production, you can have the production profile. So for the testing, you can have the testing profile. So on all those configuration, we can write on this application dot properties file, whether it is an application the properties, application properties, or the application local properties. So what is Spring Boot Actuator? So Actuator adds production ready endpoints for health metrics, environment, etc. Useful for monitoring. So in the industry level applications, we had like Prometheus dashboard, Grafana dashboard. So it's a like common stack in the production. It monitors the health and response time and the error count and the heap size. So those all the health related information for a particular pod or the services. We use this kind of uh, we can say interfaces or the applications. So how do we handle the exception globally? So we can use controller advice and the exception handle annotations for the centralized error response. So instead of we use like a plain text tag, so instead of printing that, we can return the customized JSON error for the API. So we can see this also in so when we hit some API and it get a client API and it gets some error, so we get a good JSON response instead of a lot of unused response for the error. So what is Spring Data JPA? Basics things they can ask. We had a dedicated video where I have covered most of the Spring Data JPA interview questions. So you can watch that video as well. So Spring Data JPA it simplifies the database access with a repository interface like JPA repository. It have CRUD repository as well. So we see sometimes we use uh, user repository we create, and we can extend this JPI repository passing the entity and the primary key type for that particular field. So by default we will be getting the all the CRUD operation, so without writing any and DAO boilerplate code. So pagination and sorting, how to do this pagination and sorting with the Spring Boot. uh, so you can mention or they can ask give this question in a different way. So for example, an API is returning millions of records, so this response time will be huge. So how you can handle that particular response? So at that time you can use a pagination. So instead of returning millions of record at a time, so we can use like thousands response or the thousand records at a times, and the next page the again another thousands. So like that it improve that performance issue as well. So what is caching in the Spring Boot? You can enable like caching with the enable caching and use cacheable and cacheable. So mainly, so when we are hitting some database, so the response which is similar or which is common response, we can cache that. So instead of hitting database directly, we can get it from the cache. So doing this, like DB hit will be reduced, and the in the high traffic situations, the application will perform well as well. So recently we have created a caching playlist. You can go and watch that as well for better understanding. What is Spring Security? So Spring Security it provides the authentication and authorization based on the roles and JWT tokens and with authorizations. So for example, so if you are the admin and you have the admin role, you can access the API. If you are the user, you have the user role, you can view few of the APIs. You cannot update it. So those we can do using this Spring Security. So what is the default in embedded server provided in the Spring Boot? So as we discussed, the Spring Boot uses the embedded Tomcat as a default server, but you can switch to some other JT and some other depending upon your requirement. So how to change a port in a Spring Boot application? So by default it's run 8080 uh, a port. So you can mention in the application.properties file or the application.yml file with the fields server.port equal to then port number. Then what is CORS and why it is important? So cross origin resource sharing. So it mainly control how you connect the REST API are accessed from the different domains. So for example, your front-end application is running in this 3000 port and it is calling your backend application which is running on 8080. So without enabling of course, browser block those domains. So you need to enable it using at the rate cross origin or the global configuration. So doing that, your front-end application will easily access your backend applications. So how do you handle the file upload in the Spring Boot? So here also in this particular topic, I have created separate videos as well, where I have use how to upload the text file, image file, video file on your local storage. So you can, if you have time, you can go and watch that for the better understanding purpose as well. Else you can tell that we can handle the file upload by accepting multi-part file as an parameter in the controller methods. So using at the rate request param. So this saves the file to the disk or any third-party cloud provider. So we mainly use these multi-part files uh, when we want to like store that profile pictures of the candidate or the users in any storage places. So explain the request body. So request body tells the Spring to map a JSON body of an HTTP request to the Java object. So we have also seen this most of the time when in the Postman we pass a JSON object. So after that it convert that particular JSON object to the particular type. So for example, we have pass an user payload. As then it can map that using the from that JSON to user DTO object. And what is the purpose of response body? So response body tells Spring to serialize the returned value of the method as JSONs. So directly in the HTTP response. So as a response, we got some kind of JSONs. So we can also manage in this response body. So it's automatically included in your like other REST controller when you annotate with the other REST controller. So it's actually combine this response body as well. So this we already discussed. So we can enable using the course origin annotations on the controller. So or you can configure in any configuration classes, and we can use like course configuration source as in um, fields. So next question is that how do you implement a REST client using REST templates or the web client? So the Spring Boot it provided by default REST template for the synchronized HTTP call, where by using that we can use different, we can call different microservices, um, and we can use web client for this reactive and non-blocking HTTP client. So web client is mainly preferred for scalable and non-blocking scenarios. So, and the next question is that what is the difference between at the rate configurations properties or at the rate value annotations? So, at the rate configuration properties, it's map the properties group from the application dot properties or the application dot YML file into a Java POJO for the easier management. Instead of directly using at the rate value annotations or in the multiple fields, so it's using configuration properties, it make the codes more clear now. So what is at the rate enable caching and the caching in the Spring Boot? So as we talk this enable caching, we can use at the on the top of the configuration class to turn a cacheable support. And the cache evict is for cache evict is for delete the cache put is for update the cacheable is for the get the cache. So we can use those caching concept in any e-commerce website like that. So how do you customize this logging in the Spring Boot? So instead, so by default we see some warning, some info logs on the console. So you can mainly configure the specific loggers and their labels in the application dot properties file. So it would be easier for the developer to debug the codes and view the logs. So what is at the rate schedule annotation? So schedule annotation let you to define methods to run at fixed interval, or you can provide cron expression or at a particular delay that method can be executed. So we mainly use this schedule tasks like some daily cleanup of the expert token or generating batch report every night. So for that we can use the schedule annotations. So what is Spring Boot DevTools? So DevTools provide reloaded and improves the development productivity. So it watches class path changes and restart the app automatically when you make any changes in the application. You no need to do a fresh restart on by yourself. It manually, sorry, it automatically restart and speed up your development process. So what is the difference between auto-add inject and the resource annotation? So auto-add it comes from Spring dependency injection annotations, and inject comes from Java standard. Resource is used as bean name by default. So in Spring Boot we mostly use this auto-add, and it is most commonly used. So and in the industry level application also for most injection scenario, especially in the enterprise microservices, we can use this auto-add for more readability and the Spring injection. So next question is that how can you run a Spring Boot without a main method? So the answer is that we need to have main method as an entry point to run any Spring Boot applications. So what is the difference between post construct and the pre-restore annotations? So Spring manages the beans through the lifecycle callback. So post construct runs after the bean instantiation, and the pre-restore runs before the destructions. So what is the different bean scope in Spring Boot? Spring beans have the scope like singleton, prototype, request, sessions. So that determining their life cycle and the creation frequency. So the controller beans in the initial level, we can use these controller beans are usually the singletons. It will be one object is created throughout the applications, while the request and session beans may be used in web context where the stateless data is held per user. What is conditional on property annotations? So these annotations let you conditionally enable or disable beans based on the configuration properties. It can be acted like features or toggle. How do you handle the transactions in the Spring Boot? We can use other transactional annotations for transactional boundaries so that DB operations either succeed or fail automatically. For example, you order something and it goes to the order services, then placing an order, then after deducting, it will deduct that particular product from the inventory, then the added a record on the payment. So if one of the service or operation got failed, then everything should be rolled back. Or if all it's got success, then it will be success. So difference between embedded and the external server, as we discussed, by default the Tomcat provided Spring Boot provided Tomcat as an embedded servers that allow you to package and run the jar. You can also deploy as an or to the external server as well. What is Swagger or OpenAPI? The Swagger or OpenAPI auto generates the interactive API documentation showing the endpoint, request, response duty, and the sample. So mainly the teams uses this Swagger API as an so front-end developer can test the backend API without writing the code first. That improve the collaboration between the team as well. So what are the typical enterprise environments? So enterprise app commonly have like dev environment, queue environment, staging environment, uh, and the production environment. So each of these configurations is done on the application.properties file. So depending upon the environment, it will fetch the details from the application.properties file. So that's we have came to the end of the videos. So thanks for watching the video, and if you have any feedback, please provide on the comment section.